So just in my life in general, I've always loved going to coffee shops. So I
Mhm.
think starting in like high school, I when I got my driver's license, I
Mhm.
started going to coffee shops with my friends. And I mean, I've spent like countless hours inside of coffee shops, whether it be just like catching up with friends or studying. So I've always loved the environment of being in a coffee shop because I'm a type of person, like, I feel like I'm very easily affected by my environment, and I really
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
aesthetics, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I like all of the, like, the sensory aspects, I guess, that come with, like, being in a coffee shop, you know, because it's, like,
Mhm.
visually, it's, like these days, they're all very, like, minimalistic and just, like, look really nice, but then, you know, there's, like, the smell of, like, coffee, and
Mm.
then there's also, like usually they're playing some, like, lo-fi music.
That's so true.
And then you can, like, taste the coffee, so I just feel like it touches on, like, all of your senses, you know, it's just a really
Mhm.
good, like, experience, just being in a coffee shop. But then with quarantine, a lot of coffee shops, they shut down their indoor dining. I think now it's a little better, so some are, like, opening up at limited capacity, but definitely, like, for the majority of this past year, they were all, like, closed,
Mhm.
and that was kind of an aspect that I really liked about going to coffee shops, was, like, sitting there and, like, being there.
Right. Right.
So I figured that quarantine would be a really good time for me to start making my own coffee because I was like, I figured I probably shouldn't, go out to coffee shops like all the time. And also, like, I guess to me, it just felt more worth it if I could go and sit there. But like, with COVID, you can't really like, you couldn't really sit there and stuff. So I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna like start making my own coffee. And I kind of in the back of my mind, like I always wanted to, take the plunge and like start making my own coffee, but it's a little bit of an investment just because there's a lot of different
Mhm.
tools like involved in pour over because you have like the actual like brewer and then you also have like you want a gooseneck kettle, you want a good grinder, and like there's just all these things. So I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to like take the plunge. But then with quarantine, I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yeah, yeah. And so I
Okay.
did. And honestly, it was like one of the best decisions I've like made
Yeah.
for myself. Um, I guess like what I really love about making coffee is like I feel like there's so much to learn about making your own coffee because there's so many different variables that go into a cup of coffee.
Mhm.
So, like, some of those variables are, like, the grind size of the beans. So you could have, like, a coarser grind or, like, a finer grind, and that affects the taste.
Mhm.
And also, like, the temperature of the water that you brew at will affect the taste. There's this thing called water to, like, coffee ratio, which is, like, the amount of water that you pour at a time, coordinated to, like, the amount of beans that you have, and so it can get really complicated, because there's so many different, like, methods of making coffee, and the awesome thing is, like, there's no one right way to brew a cup of coffee, which is also what I really like about it, like, it's just kind of like a free, like, creative space kind of in that
That's
way,
true. Yeah.
like, there's so much that you can, like, experiment with and play around with. Yeah, so I think that's, like, what's really cool about it, and
Mhm.
also, like, there's just so many different people, like, involved in making a cup of coffee because if you think about it, there are, the farmers who farm the coffee beans themselves,
Mhm.
and then they get sent to the roasters who roast the coffee beans that then get sent to, like, the coffee shop owners, and then the baristas, like, will, like, use those beans. So I just think it's really cool too that, like, coffee is very relational in that way, I feel like, and
Yeah.
it's a very, like, common shared experience by so many people. Yeah, so I think that's kind of that's, like, how I got into coffee and kind of, like, what I really like about it too.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's like an entire community, I think, who's like really like their whole passion is coffee. And it's interesting because you would think like, oh, like it's just a drink or whatever, but there is so much behind it. And honestly, like I didn't know so many of the things until like you explained them to me and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like interesting to learn about it because it's not just like, oh, like put the beans and then put the water and that's it. Like there's other
Right.
factors that influence the taste, you know?
Yeah, no, it's so funny, I think, because like even for me, like when I went to coffee shops, I didn't
Mhm.
like know what process like went into like making the coffee. I just was like, oh, I always get like a latte,
Oh
because
yeah.
I like milk too.
Yeah.
So it was just like, I didn't know like how it was like made and stuff. And I mean, pour over is like completely different too, because like lattes and stuff are made with espresso machines. So espresso is like an entirely different art, honestly.
Mhm.
Like that's like super complicated and stuff. But yeah, like most people don't really know, like the process that goes into making coffee.
Right.
Which is why I think there is like such a large like community behind coffee actually. Like even on social media, like there's a YouTube community, there's a like Instagram community, there's a really big Reddit community as well about
Of
coffee.
course.
I
There's a
know.
Reddit community for everything.
I know. I know. It was so funny too because I never used Reddit until I started like making my own coffee. Because it's actually super like informational and people just share a bunch of like tips and like their experiences. Yeah, so I think it's really cool that there's like this whole community around coffee too.
Mhm. I think it's cool that you can like be creative with coffee because that's how I kind of feel with tea in a sense.
Mhm.
Because I kind of got into like making milk tea and stuff at home, like over quarantine a little bit.
How fun. That's like so fun.
Yeah, like I had no idea that like milk tea, they just use like creamer instead of milk.
Oh,
That kind
yeah.
of crushed my dreams, but I was like, whatever, it's still good. So I would like try, I would just experiment with like different types of tea and like milk. Oh yeah, like Christine made me a cup of coffee. It was like very therapeutic. All the
Yes.
hot water and like heating it up and like pouring it and all that
Yeah,
stuff, very therapeutic.
such a process. Yeah. Wait,
Hmm.
did I use the pink brewer, that one? Or was it the white one?
I think it was a white one.
Okay, okay, the V60.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
anybody there who like knows about coffee, I use a V60 and an origami dripper. So I guess like the differences between the brewers too. So
Hmm.
V60 is like a cone-shaped brewer. A lot of people like have it starting out. The origami dripper, it can use both like cone-shaped filters and like flat bottom filters. And usually like you need a completely different dripper to like use flat bottom filters. So
Hmm.
that's why it's like kind of unique because it has like a dual purpose. Yeah, so that's also really interesting how there's like so many different types of brewers and people say that it affects the taste and stuff for people who are like really into coffee.
Yeah, I feel like you would have to be really experienced to like notice the differences in taste just from like different equipment.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
honestly, like I'm so amazed at how, like for every bag of beans, like all different types of coffee that are like sourced from different places, like there's different tasting notes.
Hmm.
And there's people who they have to like come up with those like tasting notes. Mad
Oh
respect.
wow.
I don't know how, I don't know. Those are like super tasters, because like
Yeah.
for me, like I can tell that there's a difference for sure between like the coffee that I make and like the coffee that like my dad makes with like a drip machine.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like it's definitely like completely different. And even when I use different beans, I can tell that there's a difference, but I can't like pinpoint to you like what that difference is, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
You know, like
Just
I
like
can't be like, oh,
instinctual.
like yeah. I can't just like sip this and be like, oh, this is like raspberry and citrus and like
Yeah.
like I can tell the if something tastes like more acidic or like more bitter, which is kind of like a lot of coffee people will like use those terms, I guess. I definitely can taste like acidity, but I don't know how to like pinpoint exactly like what the notes are.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that takes a lot of time and
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I feel like taste is very subjective as well. So
Hmm.
I think it's kind of interesting to like tasting notes because I don't know, some people who are really into coffee too, they say to not like trust or like depend on tasting notes a lot when you buy a bag of beans because like taste is subjective. So I think that's really interesting too.
Yeah. I can't tell the difference between anything. Honestly, because I like my coffee drinks like very milky,
Oh, yes.
but that's because I can't take caffeine. So
Right, right.
like most of the time I'm not even drinking the coffee like for the coffee.
Right.
Like I always get a decaf, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So then
yeah.
I'm like, there's no point. I'm drinking sweet milk at the end of the day with like a hint of coffee. Uh,
But tea is okay for you, right?
yeah, well, okay. I thought that way, but then sometimes I'll like drink tea or like milk tea and I don't realize how strong it is. Or stuff like matcha. I always thought matcha was the weakest like tea or whatever. But
Oh,
apparently it's not because it's like ground up tea leaves.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't realize until later. And then I'd like not be able to sleep. And I'm like, why can't I sleep? And I'm like, oh, it's probably because of that matcha thing I drank or ate like 3 hours ago. Yeah.
That's so funny. I know. It's so deceiving.
But for coffee though, like, yeah, I think it's really cool that there's just, there's so many factors and it brings a lot of people together. And I feel like you can learn a lot of things from it, like besides just the actual technical, making process. So what are
Yes.
some things that like you've learned
Oh,
being
yeah.
in the coffee making hobby?
No, totally. So I think honestly, one thing that I've learned from making coffee, and this contributes to like, the self-care aspect, is
Hmm.
just like slow down and like enjoy the process, you know?
Hmm.
Because when you make a cup of coffee, it takes you at least like, I don't know, 2.5 to like 3 minutes if you're brewing for like one person.
Hmm.
And, like
Yeah.
when there's kind of that waiting period, because you pour, like, let's say I'll pour like, I don't know, like 50 grams of water in like 10 seconds or something. And then you have to wait for it to like kind of drip down a little bit and then you pour more.
Hmm.
And I think it's just been so like helpful for me, to just like focus on like one thing that I'm doing and not have to think about like my responsibilities for the day or just anything else and just like enjoy like making my cup of coffee and just being present and yeah, like slowing down, And I think it really has taught me to slow down because like it's not a fast, like you can't expedite the process. You just have to kind of you go through with it. But I definitely also find it like very therapeutic as you've like seen, like it's very
Hmm.
and also very sensory in a way because like
Hmm.
you're doing stuff with your hands, you smell the coffee and you hear it like dripping down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so honestly, like I like look forward to like waking up the next day to like make my cup of
Yeah,
coffee.
that's so good, honestly.
Yeah, it really is something that it's such a small thing, but it really just like brightens my day. And it's something that I have that I can like look forward to. But yeah, I would say I've definitely just learned to just slow down and enjoy the process.
Hmm.
And it's really helpful too with, nursing is so like fast paced and
Yeah, it is.
yeah, I mean like especially like with actually being at the hospital now for clinicals, there's something that's like always going on. You're like always on the go. And, with school and being a student and just juggling all of the other responsibilities that we have in our lives, like it's, I think our society is just so like fast paced in that way. And I think it is really important to just find a hobby or find something that you can just enjoy, like because you enjoy it, and
Hmm.
you don't have to worry about anything else. You can just be present and yeah, just like be happy doing whatever you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember like when you were making me the cup of coffee, like we had that epiphany together, like literally in the kitchen when we were like, after I've just made my own coffee, like I just can't go back to like the other coffees that I've tried because it just
Yeah.
you can taste that it's like burnt or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And we
No.
were like saying how for certain things in life too, like once you've tried the better things, you just can't go back
Oh my
to
gosh,
like
yeah,
what
that
you've had.
profound moment. I remember. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I mostly brew like light roast beans too. So
Mhm.
like coffee that comes out, it doesn't taste like bitter. So definitely I was like, oh my gosh, this is like life changing.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, I cannot drink burnt coffee again.
Hmm. Yeah. So the moral of the story is the little hobbies, they end up not just being little hobbies. Like you learn life lessons from it.
Oh
And I
yeah.
feel like yeah, you just like learn a lot more things from it than just like the technical things. And so
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting because, you get to learn something about everything that you do.
So true. There's always just so much to learn in life, I think that's what makes the world like fascinating.
I agree.